Today, I want to talk with you about China, a very important topic. I want to talk about its rise, its impacts, and its relevance. In 1950, US GDP was 20 times that of China's GDP. Today, it is 3.5 times that of China's GDP, 11 times that of India's GDP. Guess when China's GDP will catch up with that of the US? 2050? 2040? Let me make very conservative assumptions. One, that let's assume that the US finally digs itself out of a recession and goes back to the 2.5% growth. And let's assume that China grows at 6%. I'm not saying the 11, the 10, or even 8%. Let's just conservatively assume that it grows at 6%. And let's assume that China's currency appreciates vis-a-vis dollar by 4%. If you do the math, which is an easy task for this audience, it becomes clear that China will catch up with US GDP by 2025. 2025. Now, what happens after 2025? Will China rise and then go flat or dip, as Japan did? My answer is unlikely. You see, Japan has a population of 120 million. So when Japan's per capita income reaches that of the US, it essentially joined the rich man's club. So nobody, not even Nobel Prize winning economist, has figured out how to make a rich economy grow by more than 2 to 3% a year. So Japan's rise was a big story, all right? But it did not fundamentally change the global economic structure. When China reached the size of the US, China's per capita GDP is still only going to be a quarter of that of the US, meaning that China still has a long way to grow to become rich. If I just assume that, say, US continues in 2.5% growth and China slows down to 5% and renminbi no longer appreciates, by 2050, China's GDP could be twice the size of the US. Now, India follows a similar trend, trailing China by about 12 to 14 years. And that is the time lag between when 1978, when China started the economic reform, and 1991, when India started the liberalization. In essence, ladies and gentlemen, by 2050, the combined GDP of China and India could be as large as the combined GDP of US, Europe, and Japan. As Henry Kissinger has famously said, China's rise is inevitable. There's nothing we can do to prevent it. To engage with China, whether you as a business leader or a policymaker or a policy influencer, I would say that the starting point for strategizing is to understand the major thrusts of how China is changing the global economic structure. First, China is the single biggest factor to transform the global economy from a unipolar to a multipolar world. According to many projections, by 2040, China, India, US, in that order, plus EU, will account each about 20% of the world's GDP, with the rest of the economies accounting the rest of the 20%. Meaning that if you want to become a global player, or if you want to stay as a global leader, do you have a robust strategy? Do you have the solid footprint in each of those mega rising poles? Second, the rise of China and India, plus overall the rise of the developing economies overall is making every industry a growth industry on a global basis. 60% of the world's population lives in developing economies that are growing at 3 times the pace of the developed ones. China and India, mega markets. Millions of people there are buying their first mobile phones, their first TV, their first car, their first house, their first bottle of wine. Although the Chinese appreciate wine by mixing wine with Coke, they do not know how to appreciate wine, but nonetheless they are buying. No other country has all 5 stories rolled into one. Now, each story is powerful enough by itself. When you combine the 5, it is transformational. So my friends, with each passing day, the world is becoming more multipolar and at the same time more integrated. It is seemingly 2 kind of directions, more multipolar, but at the same time more integrated. Okay? And that becomes challenging for companies to cope with that kind of the world. Because you cut your root, you die. But you cut your chain, you are free. And the question is, what is your root and what is your chain in this kind of integrated, multipolar world? The transformation is happening at a fast rate. And we can be rest assured that the next 10 years is going to be changing even faster than the last 20 years. And my friends, the time to prepare for it is now, not 5 or 10 years from now. When we face non-linear change, some companies will adapt, reinvent, prosper, and thrive, and others will die. And the future belongs to those companies that can build a globally integrated enterprise with roots in many countries. The world is not just market, but a school. The world is your oyster. Do you have the right folk? Thank you so much for your listening. I really